Aaron Breitman from the Scarlet Faithful here. I wanted to take this video to actually take an excerpt from the Eyes on College Basketball CBS podcast hosted by Matt Norlander from this past week. He had national recruiting analyst Adam Finkelstein as a guest. And one segment that they did in the podcast, which was a great listen overall, was they talked about Rutgers basketball in terms of recruiting in the class of 2024, coming off the Peach Jam, Dylan Harper, his performance. They spoke about him as a recruit, his recruitment with Rutgers and Duke, timeline. Also spoke about Ace Bailey. And one thing that I think is really exciting and is going to be a whole nother kind of angle if the 2024 class comes to fruition for Rutgers is what Matt Norlander said, and I've mentioned it before, is what a national story it will be if Rutgers does land both Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, currently the number 1 and number 2 recruits in the 2024 class, and the impact that that would have on the sport and the college basketball landscape. And Norlander talked about how he enjoys things in terms of going against the norm and how Rutgers getting that type of talent would be unique and also just a great story. He talked about Steve Pike a little bit. Adam Finkelstein really went into Dylan Harper's recruitment, and also just in terms of how he played at Peach Jam and Team USA over at the World Cup, and also went into a little bit of detail at Ace Bailey. So I thought for Rutgers fans, it was definitely worth knowing about and definitely worth hearing what they had to say. So I have the full segment that's going to now follow me, and then I'll have a little recap at the end. So enjoy.
But Rutgers, there's an interesting developing plot point with Rutgers. So Ace Bailey is the number 2 player in the class of 24. He is already committed to Rutgers.
He is.
And then you've got Harper, who is the number 1 player, plays with the New York Renaissance. The Wrens made the semis, I think. And he had a solid week. Now, Harper was with Team USA. He flew over to Europe. He played over there. That team actually didn't wind up even medaling. Came back. If my calendar is right here, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. I think because of that, he didn't even go to NBPA top 100. I think he came,
correct.
Came from Europe right to Peach Jam, right?
Yeah, he and Trey Johnson both made that trip. They were both on the floor. I think it was like 36 hours later after losing that bronze medal game.
Crazy, right? So I took that into account when watching him play. Because that travel is just insane. But how would you evaluate Harper's game and his recruitment at this point, which is obviously intriguing because Rutgers involved with the number 1 ranked recruit period certainly turns heads, and the fact that they've already got the number 2 guy in the class. I don't know if he'll wind up going there, but it certainly is.
It's a very realistic possibility. I mean, I think there's 5 schools that are technically in the mix, but the vast majority of us expect this to come down to Rutgers and Duke. Harper's older brother just graduated from Rutgers, had a terrific career there. Obviously, his dad, Ron Harper, former NBA All-Star, world champion with the Chicago Bulls, shared the backcourt with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. But Dylan Harper is somewhat similar, somewhat similar to his dad in that he is just a big, well-rounded guard. Dylan is a lefty. He's about 6'4", 6'5". He's long. He's strong. He's got a terrific feel for the game. I mean, he can just play within the flow of what's going on. And if you watch that USA basketball team, while they did not finish the way they wanted, Dylan was someone who earned a lot of praise because he could impact the game without being the quote-unquote man. You know, he didn't need the ball in his hands and the freedom to go to work every possession like maybe some other high-profile guys do. But then you put him with the Wrens where he does have the ball in his hands and everything does start with him, and he plays that role to perfection as well. To perfection is probably an overstatement, but he plays that role extremely well. So I think that the takeaway for me, and I tweeted this on Saturday after he really just carried his team to the semifinals, was that for all the talk about the young guys, Dylan Harper made it pretty clear that he is the top rising senior, at least in the EYBL. Ace Bailey, who is committed to Rutgers, he plays on AOT, which is a program previously sponsored by Nike, but is now independent. So he was at independent events. And the reality is he just doesn't have as many eyeballs on him. But he tried out for that USA basketball 19 and under team. He got the flu, and so he wasn't able to continue. But he would have made that team.
He looked awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he didn't show up, I guess, for one session in Colorado Springs, and it was like, where is he? He got sick.
Right.
He looked awesome, Adam.
Yeah.
Love his potential. Yes.
No, and the challenge when, is to be able to evaluate him against high level competition. And so for me, when I went out to that setting, and you were there as well, that was my biggest objective going in, was to measure Ace Bailey against high level talent, not just rising seniors, but also incoming college freshmen and even some rising college sophomores. And he did. I mean, he's 6'8", every bit of 6'8". He's long, he's athletic, but he's also got like a really clean shooting stroke. And you put that stuff all together, and he may have more sheer talent than anyone. Dylan Harper right now is the more efficient basketball player, but that race is not done by a long shot. So do they both end up at Rutgers? It's very possible. Does Ace Bailey have a chance to overtake Dylan Harper for number one? That's certainly a possible outcome in the next 8 to 10 months. But it all makes for some pretty good theater, because it's also very possible that Rutgers comes away with the top 2 players in the class and outduels Duke for one of them.
Listen, ultimately, I really, it doesn't matter to me where these guys go. But having said that, I do like interesting, and I do like different. And I've said this a few times over the years on this show. When you have a top 5, top 10 prospect that picks a destination that is not, the customary one,
right?
Rutgers getting the top 2 players would be an incredible storyline for college basketball. Duke is going to get the dudes, okay? And Shire and that staff have continued to recruit at the level that they were doing in Krzyzewski's final few years here. So maybe Dylan Harper does go play for Duke, and if he does, well, more power to him, and Duke will enter the 24-25 season as a top 5 program again, without a doubt. But if we were able to get Harper and Bailey playing at Rutgers, it would bring a different kind of energy. It would be really cool. And for Peichel, who has been a guy that, he has done what was once seen as borderline impossible at the university and made Rutgers into a real factor most seasons in the Big Ten. And now, Brandon Knight is his ace assistant and has been in there and been such a major factor. It's something intriguing to watch. I don't know if last thing on these guys before we get to DeBonsa, again, I don't know. I just want to tee this up for you, and if you know it, cool. If not, that's fine. But there was buzz that Harper might announce soon. Do we? By soon, is that like? Do we know a few weeks? Like the next month? Could it drag on? Do we know what his situation is when it comes to picking a school?
Travis Branham just did some reporting on that over on the 24/7 Sports site. I would say it's somewhat fluid. I know like Bill Self in Kansas, they're trying to get in the mix there. Mike Woodson in Indiana, they're trying to get in the mix there again. I think this comes down to Rutgers and Duke, but there are, whenever you're talking about a player of this magnitude, especially in this day and age of college basketball, there's a lot of different variables to try and line up before you make a commitment. So I think it's safe to say that we are all on commitment watch, but that we don't currently believe anything is totally imminent.
Pretty incredible to, first of all, Matt Norlander, national writer for CBS. Pretty big deal. He's one of the best out there. And for him to dedicate a whole segment on Rutgers basketball was pretty cool to watch. And then Adam Finkelstein, national recruiting analyst. It's still bizarre, to see Rutgers get so much attention now on the recruiting trail. I mentioned, I think it was in a previous podcast recently, just in terms of even at the Peach Jam last week, seeing Rutgers mentioned in so many different tweets from national recruiting guys that were there. And obviously, Dylan Harper is a big reason why, just in terms of, there's Duke, there's Kansas, and there's Rutgers. It's still surreal. It just is another kind of marker of how Steve Peichel has elevated the program. And if you caught my spaces last night, which had a bunch of Rutgers writers in there and had a really good turnout. There's a recording I have of it on Twitter, but was just talking about how Steve Peichel has always gone after the top recruits, right? Since he got to Rutgers, at Naz Reid, Lewis King, if you remember those names from 7 years ago. Scotty Lewis, Brian Antoine, bunch of top recruits, bunch of 5-star recruits, but he now has the credibility. He now has the traction. He has the he's proven he can win at Rutgers. Norlander touched on it a little bit. And in terms of what he's done at Rutgers and how no one really believed it was possible. So this is just the next step. And to have a national college basketball podcast, have two of the most respected national college basketball reporters talk about Rutgers basketball recruiting for 5 to 6 minutes, it's pretty special. And I think it just ties to a bigger point of things are going to get crazy. If Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey both come to Rutgers, and by the way, the entire 24 class, and I did touch on this in the spaces last night, having 4-star Bryce Dortch and 4-star Lathan Somerville as part of that class, really important in terms of stability for the program. Bailey and Harper likely one and dones potentially. I would say right now the thought would be they probably are, but which would be a good problem to have because it means they would have really good years if they do both come to Rutgers. But the point is the national spotlight on Rutgers would be unprecedented if they both come. So I think that's going to be an interesting part of all this to watch with Steve Peichel and the program and how they potentially manage, if it does come to fruition, how they manage that whole thing, because it's going to be a whole nother level. And, it kind of speaks also to, I've said, Dylan Harper going to Duke, going to Kansas, he's just another top-rated recruit, right? And going to Rutgers, he's a transformational recruit. He's a generational recruit. He is a program-changing recruit. And the spotlight, in a way, would be brighter on him at Rutgers than it would even be at a Duke or a Kansas, just because it's kind of the status quo there, and it's the brand is so big. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey together at Rutgers would basically be rewriting the brand of Rutgers basketball or writing a modern version of it. So fascinating stuff. I hope you enjoyed watching what they had to say. Going to have obviously plenty of coverage of this. I do think Finkelstein kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of Harper. His quote was it was funny. It was like, it could be after the Peach Jam, could be during the season. He's kind of going back and forth. I think for me, I would not be shocked if it was the end of the summer, if he made a call going into, he's been very busy and he's got other things going on in terms of basketball things the rest of the summer. I could see maybe the end of the summer heading into the fall, right before school year starts, deciding. Maybe not. Maybe he will bring it into the season. But that kind of timeline would not shock me. But I think it's wide open. So exciting times. Obviously, we have plenty to look forward to in terms of how Rutgers fills out the 2023-2024 roster. More to come on that. But the future is certainly bright. And seeing two national analysts focus on Rutgers on a national podcast, we have to appreciate these moments, right? And they're all kind of like markers in the sand. And I just thought that this was a significant one to touch on. So hope you enjoyed it. And find all my coverage at thescarletfaithful.com. And I'll include a link in this YouTube video bio for the Eyes on College Basketball podcast with Matt Norlander for the full episode.